The heavy scent of roses mixed with a sharp bite of cold air as I stood trembling just behind the towering oak doors of the ceremony hall. My heart pounded, a slow, painful drum inside my chest. Something felt off. I couldn't explain it, but deep in my gut, a silent alarm screamed. I clutched the small, ivory card in my hand. My vows. Words I had spent weeks perfecting. Words that carried the essence of who I was and the promises I yearned to make to the man waiting for me at the altar. But as I read over them one last time, confusion and dread pooled in my stomach. These weren't my words. The card shook between my fingers. I blinked hard, rereading each line, willing the letters to rearrange themselves into something familiar. But no. Someone had rewritten them. Someone had taken my promises, my heart, and twisted them into something shallow and foreign. I vow to always support the decisions of our families, to place tradition above all else, to honor the expectations set before me. What? Panic crawled up my throat. This wasn't me. This wasn't what I wrote. I glanced desperately around the dimly lit hallway. The wedding planner smiled at me from a distance, clueless. My bridesmaids, chatting giddily, adjusting their dresses, had no idea of the betrayal clutching my chest. I was trapped. I was seconds away from walking down the aisle, and suddenly, it wasn't just my nerves faltering, it was my very soul being ripped from me. Who did this? Why? And most importantly, what the hell do I do now? My mind raced back to the night before, the final rehearsal dinner. Everything had seemed perfect. My future husband, Michael, had been glowing with excitement. His parents, however, I remembered the tight smiles, the lingering glances they exchanged when my vows were mentioned. An uneasy shiver snaked down my spine. Was it them? Could they really have stooped so low? I swallowed hard, my mouth dry as dust. A faint sound pulled me back. A violinist had begun playing. The doors would open any second now. Guests sat waiting. Michael stood at the altar, expecting to hear my heart in those vows. Not this corporate, lifeless garbage. I had two choices. Go along with the charade, or burn the entire farce to the ground. My palms grew sweaty as I looked at the card again, every word cutting into me like tiny knives. Place tradition above all else. That wasn't just a rewrite. That was a message. I could almost hear my future mother-in-law's voice. Family is everything. We don't air dirty laundry. We uphold our name, no matter what. I had loved Michael with every fiber of my being. But this betrayal? It wasn't just an insult, it was a warning shot. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a tool. The pit in my stomach deepened. All the tiny moments, Michael's hesitation when discussing honeymoon plans, his odd defensiveness about family traditions, the way he avoided telling me about financial decisions, they all clicked into place like a sinister puzzle. They had planned this. They wanted to mold me. And I had walked blindly into their trap. The wedding planner approached, her smile wide, oblivious to the chaos unraveling inside me. "It's time," she whispered, gently touching my arm. I nodded stiffly, slipping the card into the folds of my dress. But I made a silent vow in that moment, not the one written on the ivory card. No. Something much darker, much sharper bloomed inside me. They wanted a good little bride? They wanted tradition? Fine. But they were about to find out that I had a tradition of my own. Never cross me. As the doors creaked open and the first notes of the wedding march filled the air, I lifted my chin high. My heart thundered, not with fear, but with fire. I would walk down that aisle. I would smile. I would say my vows. But they wouldn't be the vows they expected. No. I had a little surprise planned, one that would leave every smug face in that room absolutely shattered. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled, a real, wicked smile, beneath the soft veil that covered my face. Today wasn't the day they crushed me. Today was the day I rose. The soft crunch of my heels against the carpet echoed through the silent hall as I moved forward. Every step felt heavier, as if the air itself thickened to trap me. Rows of smiling faces turned, a blur of pastels and camera flashes. But all I could focus on was him, Michael, standing tall at the altar, his smile easy, his hands clasped in front of him like he had no idea what had just happened. Maybe he didn't. Or maybe he did. My father at my side leaned closer and whispered, "You okay?" sensing the tension in my body. I nodded stiffly, unable to find my voice without unleashing the storm building inside me. As we approached, Michael's eyes softened, full of the love I had always believed in. For a split second, doubt wavered in my heart. Was I being paranoid? But no, the betrayal wasn't a guess. It was real. It was paper and ink in my hand, a tangible violation of my trust. I reached the altar. Michael took my hands, his touch familiar and foreign all at once. The priest smiled warmly at us and began the ceremony. Words blurred together. Prayers, blessings, promises of unity and eternal devotion. All while that tiny card hidden in my dress burned against my skin like a brand. "And now," the priest said, turning to me with a benevolent nod, "the bride will say her vows." I inhaled deeply. Time slowed. In the second before I spoke, I saw them, Michael's mother and father, sitting in the front row, their faces tight with expectation, watching me, daring me, betting on my silence. I smiled sweetly, and then I spoke, but not the words they had written for me.
No.
I spoke the truth. Today, standing here, I was meant to read promises rewritten by hands that thought they could mold me into their perfect idea of a wife. I began, my voice steady, echoing across the hall. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Michael's brow furrowed in confusion. I continued, unwavering. But love, real love, isn't about erasing someone's soul to fit a mold. It's about celebrating who they are, flaws, dreams, stubbornness, and all. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Michael's mother's face pale, her mouth tightening into a thin, furious line. "My real vow today is this," I said, my voice growing stronger. "I promise to never shrink myself to fit into a space too small for my spirit. I promise to honor truth over appearances. I promise to fight for the love that sees and accepts me exactly as I am, not the love that demands my silence." The room was silent, so silent I could hear the sharp intake of breath from somewhere in the second row. Michael's hands trembled in mine. I looked straight into his eyes. "And if you cannot honor that," I said clearly, "then this union cannot stand."
Gasps.
A collective, stunned intake of breath. Michael's face twisted, not in anger, but in a raw, panicked fear I had never seen before. I had thrown the script away. And now there was no hiding, no saving face. Michael opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. The priest looked desperately between us, his book clutched tightly in his hands. I could almost feel the waves of rage rolling off Michael's parents. In that breathless silence, something extraordinary happened. I felt free, truly free. The chains I hadn't even realized I'd wrapped around myself for months, doubt, fear, the desperate need to fit in, to be accepted, they shattered. I turned to the guests, to the sea of family and friends who had gathered to witness a union built on lies. "I will not be bound by expectations built on fear," I said. "I will not betray myself just to make others comfortable." Michael's father stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. My mother gasped quietly behind me. Michael tightened his grip on my hands, trying to steady the moment, to pull me back from the ledge I was fearlessly leaping from. But it was too late. I had seen the truth. I had felt it, and once you taste that kind of freedom, you can never go back. I took a step back, breaking Michael's grasp. The audience sat frozen, mouths slightly open, eyes wide. I lifted my veil with shaking hands, but my smile was steady, serene. "I'm sorry," I said softly, locking eyes with Michael for one last time. "I love you, but I will not marry someone who lets others speak over my voice." And then, with a grace I didn't know I possessed, I turned. The heavy silence followed me all the way down the aisle. Every step felt lighter than the last. Somewhere behind me, a woman cried softly. Somewhere else, I heard whispered arguments breaking out. But I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I was no longer the girl desperate to be loved at any cost. I was something else now. Something dangerous. Something unstoppable. As I reached the door and pushed it open, the cold air hit me like a baptism, washing away the last traces of fear. I stepped into the sunlight, my heart beating strong and proud. And for the first time in a long, long time, I chose me. The heavy oak doors swung shut behind me with a thunderous echo, sealing the world of expectations and betrayals inside. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the crisp air, letting it fill the hollow spaces inside me that I hadn't realized were empty until now. The sky was a brilliant, defiant blue overhead, as if celebrating with me. I took a shaky step forward, then another, the gravel crunching under my heels. My dress, beautiful and wrong all at once, rustled around me, a ghost of the life I had almost chosen. Behind me, the door cracked open. Footsteps, fast, desperate, followed. "Wait, please." Michael's voice cut through the air. I stopped but didn't turn. Not yet. His footsteps slowed as he approached, careful now, as if afraid he might shatter me with one wrong move. "Please," he said again, his voice thick with emotion. "Don't go." Slowly, I turned to face him. Gone was the polished, confident man I had walked toward earlier. In his place stood someone raw, unmasked, vulnerable. His hands trembled at his sides. "I didn't know," he said, voice cracking. "I didn't know they." I held up a hand, silencing him. "You didn't know they rewrote my vows?" I asked quietly. "You didn't know they tried to erase my voice?" Michael swallowed hard, guilt written across every line of his face. "I should have protected you," he said, the words falling like broken glass between us. "I should have known." A part of me wanted to believe him. A part of me screamed for him, to make it make sense. But deeper still, the part of me that had walked out of that church, the part that had chosen herself, knew the truth. If he truly loved me, he would have seen. He would have asked. He would have fought for me long before today. "You were supposed to stand beside me," I said softly. "Not stand by while they tried to mold me into something smaller, quieter, more palatable." Tears filled his eyes, and for the first time I realized he wasn't the villain. He was just weak. And I couldn't build my future on weakness. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know," I said. And I meant it. But sorry wasn't enough. Not anymore. I turned again, lifting the hem of my dress, and walked away, this time faster, my heart pounding not with fear, but with certainty. Behind me, Michael didn't call out again. He let me go. Maybe that was his final apology. Maybe it was his final failure. I didn't go home immediately. I couldn't face the looks, the whispers, the questions. Instead, I found myself at the old bridge overlooking the river, the place where Michael and I had first said, "I love you." Funny how life circles back on itself, forcing you to confront your beginnings at the end. I leaned against the railing, the cold metal grounding me, anchoring me in this surreal new reality. In the distance, the town stirred with life, oblivious to the earthquake that had just split my world open. My phone buzzed relentlessly in my purse, calls, texts, frantic messages, no doubt. I ignored them all. For once, I didn't owe anyone an explanation. For once, I didn't have to apologize for choosing myself. I stayed there until the sun began to set, painting the sky in defiant streaks of orange and crimson. And in that moment, I made a silent vow, not to anyone else, but to myself. I would never again let someone else's vision of me define my worth. By the time I returned to my apartment, the frenzy had reached full fever pitch. News had traveled fast. In a town like ours, it always did. My doorstep was littered with wilted flowers, apology cards, even a few anonymous letters begging me to forgive and forget. Forgive? Maybe. Forget? Never. Inside, my mother sat at my kitchen table, her face pale and drawn. She stood as soon as she saw me, rushing forward, pulling me into a fierce embrace. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered against my hair. I hadn't even realized how much I needed to hear that until the tears spilled over, soaking into her shoulder. I was so scared. I confessed, my voice muffled. I know, she said, pulling back to cup my face in her hands. But you were brave. You stood up for yourself. That's more important than any wedding. We sat down together, the weight of the day finally crashing over me. I told her everything, the rewritten vows, the confrontation, Michael's desperate apology. She listened without interrupting, her eyes filled with a fierce, protective love. When I finished, she simply said, "You chose you, and that's a choice you'll never regret." I nodded, the truth of her words sinking deep into my bones. Somewhere inside me, a new version of myself was stirring, stronger, wiser, more alive than ever before. The days that followed were a blur of awkward encounters, curious stares, and whispered conversations that stopped whenever I walked into a room. I had become the scandal of the season, the girl who walked away from the altar. Some people called me brave. Others called me selfish. But the ones whose opinions mattered most, my family, my true friends, stood by me without question. And more importantly, I stood by myself. Each morning, I woke up a little lighter. Each night, I went to bed with a little more peace. It wasn't easy. Nothing worth having ever is. There were moments when doubt crept in, whispering in the dark. Moments when I ached for the life I had almost had. But then I would remember the girl who stood at that altar and refused to be silenced. And I would smile, knowing I had made the only choice I could live with. Freedom has a price. But oh, how sweet it is. A month later, standing in front of the mirror, I hardly recognized myself. Gone was the wide-eyed girl who had waited for others to hand her a future. In her place stood a woman, scarred maybe, but gloriously, defiantly alive. I touched the delicate chain around my neck, a gift I had bought for myself after everything had crumbled. A tiny pendant shaped like a phoenix, rising from the ashes. Because that's what I had done, hadn't I? I had burned down a life that wasn't truly mine, and now I was building a new one from the ground up. I smiled at my reflection. Not a tentative, uncertain smile, but one full of pride, full of knowing. This was just the beginning. I decided to travel, something I had always dreamed of, but never dared to prioritize. 2 weeks after the wedding that never was, I boarded a plane with nothing but a backpack, a journal, and an open heart. No itinerary, no expectations, just freedom. The world welcomed me like an old friend. In the bustling streets of Rome, I wandered through cobblestone alleys, my laughter echoing off ancient walls. In the sun-drenched hills of Tuscany, I tasted wines that melted on my tongue and meals that nourished more than just my body. In quiet villages, strangers became temporary family, teaching me that kindness speaks every language. Everywhere I went, pieces of myself stitched back together, stronger, brighter. One evening, while sitting alone at a small cafe in Florence, I pulled out my journal. The pages were already filled with stories, sketches, little victories. As the sunset poured golden light over the city, I wrote, "Today, I didn't miss him. Today, I didn't question my worth. Today, I was enough, just as I am." I closed the journal with a soft, satisfied sigh. Healing wasn't linear. I had learned that quickly. Some days, the ache of what could have been hit me like a rogue wave, pulling me under. But most days now, I floated, buoyant, free, unburdened. One night, in Paris, under a velvet sky glittering with stars, I met someone. His name was Julian. He had kind eyes and a crooked smile, and he made me laugh until my cheeks hurt. But more importantly, he saw me. Not the version of me that fit neatly into a mold. Not the me I thought I had to be to deserve love. He saw me, messy, healing, real, and didn't flinch. We shared stories over coffee, danced barefoot along the Seine, lost track of time wandering through moonlit streets. For the first time in what felt like forever, I let someone in, not because I needed them, but because I wanted to. There's a difference, you know? And, oh, how sweet that difference tastes. But the real love story wasn't with Julian. It was with myself. Because in choosing to walk away, I had finally walked toward the one person I would spend the rest of my life with.
Me.
I had learned to be my own sanctuary, my own home. And no matter who came or went, I knew I would always have that. I would always have me. Months later, when I returned home, everything had shifted. The town was the same, but I wasn't. People still whispered sometimes, their curiosity lingering in the air like smoke. But I smiled at them now, unbothered. Their opinions had lost their power over me. I moved into a little cottage on the edge of town. White shutters, a wild garden, a porch swing that creaked when the wind kissed it. It was perfect. It was mine. I spent my days writing, painting, filling my life with color and music and laughter. I planted wildflowers in the front yard, their stubborn, joyful blooms a testament to resilience. And every morning, when I sipped my coffee and watched the sun rise over the hills, I whispered a prayer of thanks to the girl who had dared to choose herself. Life wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real. It was mine, and that made it beautiful beyond measure. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that day, the day I discovered my vows had been rewritten. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the searing realization that the life I thought I wanted wasn't the one meant for me. It's strange, isn't it? How life sometimes saves you by shattering you. Back then, it had felt like an ending. Now, I realize it was a beginning disguised as devastation. I often wonder, if they hadn't tampered with my vows, would I have gone through with it? Would I have spent years trying to mold myself into someone else's idea of perfect? Would I have kept quiet every time a part of me withered away inside? Would I have smiled through tears, convinced that sacrifice was the price of love? The thought chills me, because I know now, true love, whether from others or from yourself, never asks you to become less. It only asks you to become more of who you already are. I learned that pain is a portal, a brutal, messy, sacred one. It demands everything you think you are and spits you out, newborn, raw, and trembling, but also brimming with possibility. Because once you've walked through fire, you stop fearing the flames. You realize you're the fire. You are the light. You are the rebirth. Sometimes people still ask me what happened between me and him. I see the curiosity flicker in their eyes, the hunger for drama, for scandal. I could tell them the whole story. I could name names, point fingers, expose every ugly secret. But I don't. I simply smile and say, it wasn't my story to finish. And that's the truth. It was a story that had to end, for both our sakes. Because neither of us deserved a life built on pretense and expectation. We both deserved something real, even if we had to find it apart. One autumn afternoon, months after my return, I ran into his mother at the farmer's market. It was awkward. At first, a dance of forced politeness and brittle smiles. But then, something unexpected happened. She reached out and gently touched my arm. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We should have trusted you to be enough." For a moment, the world stood still. And I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I had outgrown the pain. I squeezed her hand and whispered, "I forgive you." Because holding on to resentment was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I chose to release it. I chose to be free. Forgiveness isn't always about others. Sometimes it's about setting yourself free. Forgiving yourself for not knowing better, for staying too long, for doubting your worth, for ever thinking you had to earn the right to be loved. If I could go back in time and whisper something to the girl who stood trembling on her wedding day, it would be this: you are already enough. You are already loved. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Today, when I sit on my porch swing, a cup of tea cradled in my hands, and watch the world soften into twilight, I feel nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for the heartbreak that broke me open. Gratitude for the lies that led me to truth. Gratitude for the betrayal that became the doorway to self-love. Because in the end, they didn't steal my story. They handed me the pen. And this time, I'm writing every word myself. The seasons change. The wildflowers bloom. The sun rises and sets. And through it all, I remain. Unshaken. Unapologetic. Unbreakable. Somewhere, across oceans and memories, the girl who once stood lost and heartbroken smiles. She sees me now, strong, radiant, whole, and she knows. We made it. We survived the fire. We became the fire. We are infinite. We are free.